To access the most aggressive digital export subsidies in the global market, you must establish a physical, legal corporate entity within the borders of Turkey. This physical requirement is the gateway to the Digital Product Promotion Support Framework, a highly targeted government mechanism engineered specifically to accelerate international export of Turkish-registered software and media. The core mathematical advantage of this framework is substantial. The state will directly reimburse up to Extracting this subsidy requires an architectural alignment between your legal structure and your marketing operations. The program applies specifically to digital assets. This includes mobile applications, digital games, and related IT products built for international audiences. The eligible expenses under this framework cover the core engines of digital growth: overseas broadcasting, localized marketing, and targeted digital advertising campaigns on search engines and social media platforms. If a company fails to align its structural footprint with the ministry's precise rules, it permanently nullifies its ability to access these funds, regardless of export volume or revenue success. Maximizing that 70% reimbursement rate is purely a function of preemptive corporate engineering. To ensure compliance, developers must construct their operations around 3 immutable rules. Before launching a single campaign, the ministry evaluates the foundational intellectual property structure of the entity. The ministry enforces a strict mandate known as the Single Beneficiary Rule. This establishes an exclusive one-to-one legal relationship between a specific digital product, like a mobile game, and its founding corporate entity. Under standard international mergers and acquisitions, intellectual property rejects this logic entirely. Within this system, transferring the intellectual property of an application instantly severs its support eligibility. A common compliance trap occurs when an established international studio acquires a pre-existing application and attempts to transfer its ownership to a newly established Turkish corporate shell. This action snaps the eligibility line in half. The financial consequence is immediate. The newly acquiring company is permanently barred from claiming marketing or platform commission supports for that specific digital product. The ministry engineered this restriction to prevent pure financial extraction. The rule ensures that foreign entities cannot simply buy up successful global apps, cycle their ownership through Turkish subsidiaries, and double-dip into state funds. To navigate this, the preemptive strategy must be absolute. Corporate structure and initial IP registration must be solidified in Turkey prior to launch. Retroactive compliance is mathematically impossible once an application has changed corporate hands across international borders. Under this framework, the corporate shell and the digital asset are legally fused. Severing them for structural convenience permanently severs the subsidy. Once the intellectual property is legally anchored, the variable dictating your financial return shifts from structural law to the daily execution of your marketing campaigns. This diagram illustrates the baseline metric, a flat 50. This creates a direct conflict with certain modern marketing tactics. Native, organic-looking influencer posts that obscure their commercial intent and lack clear sponsorship tags do not qualify. Only fully compliant, visibly tagged advertising campaigns are eligible for reimbursement. Marketing teams must rigidly align their platform settings with these specific compliance rules well before clicking launch on any campaign. During the official audit process, government reviewers cross-reference the submitted financial invoices against the platform's proof of sponsorship and geographical targeting. Invoices lacking either element are immediately rejected. Achieving the maximum 70% rate requires synchronizing your daily geographical campaign execution directly with the ministry's strategic macroeconomic objectives. Even when a campaign is perfectly targeted and explicitly tagged, specific creative variables can trigger severe financial penalties. The most common operational error is known as the language penalty. The subsidy mandates absolute segregation of domestic and international marketing. If any visual, written, or digital promotional material mixes the Turkish language alongside a foreign language, the campaign is flagged. This chart demonstrates the mathematical penalty. The total eligible base of the invoice drops to 50% of the initial amount. The percentage reimbursement is then calculated solely against that reduced bottom half. This penalty enforces the program's core economic objective, subsidizing pure, unmixed digital exportation, rather than inadvertently funding a company's domestic market share expansion. If a company avoids the language penalty and successfully leverages the subsidy to aggressively grow its international user base, it eventually hits a secondary compliance hurdle tied strictly to its own success. The ministry implements the one-third revenue rule as the overarching mechanism to limit infinite capital extraction by dominant applications. Look at this projection. The strict mathematical cap dictates that the total support you receive in a single year cannot exceed a flat subsidy cap set at exactly one-third of your company's foreign-sourced revenue from the previous calendar year. For newly established companies with high initial ad spend but zero historical revenue, this cap would mathematically halt their momentum. To solve this, the ministry provides a deliberate structural mitigation strategy known as the startup grace period. Under this provision, performance evaluations are entirely delayed. The one-third revenue limit does not activate until the second calendar year following the year you receive your first support payment. This extended timeline temporarily decouples the state subsidy from the strict revenue cap, exactly during the application's most critical initial scaling phase. The grace period dictates the exact optimal strategy for startups relocating to Turkey, front-loading massive, highly subsidized global user acquisition campaigns rapidly over an 18 to 24-month window before the revenue limits finally engage. Operating this system requires a synchronized ecosystem where the corporate hub and global nodes function as a single unit. The 70% digital export subsidy remains a strict function of legal engineering. It requires deliberate corporate architecture from day one. That architecture must secure intellectual property perfectly, avoiding the terminal failure point of IP transfer violations mandated by the single beneficiary rule. Operationally, the marketing execution must be flawless, maintaining strict sponsored tags while aggressively avoiding the deep financial cuts triggered by mixed-language localized campaigns. Finally, the corporate timeline must be calibrated to exploit the startup grace period, maximizing early cash flow before the one-third revenue scaling cap activates. Successfully navigating this compliance matrix creates a massive capital advantage by subsidizing the largest line item in a digital company's budget. A structurally optimized entity operating out of Turkey effectively buys its global users at a 70% discount, competing directly against foreign developers who are forced to pay the full market price for every single ad click. For IT companies willing to architect their legal and operational footprint to these exact specifications, the Turkish subsidy framework offers immense sustainable leverage for acquiring international market share.